Good morning. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for being here. This is really an important discussion, and what we're going to be talking about, excuse me, is three significant real estate developments in our downtown Portland. I am extremely excited to have been asked to moderate the discussion. I'm honored and frankly a little humbled to share the stage with these guys. I'm way out of my league, and I recognize that. So my job today is solely to get them talking as much as possible and exit stage right without messing up too badly. As Mike briefly mentioned, these guys are going to give individual presentations on their specific projects, 7 or 8 minutes each, plus or minus. Afterwards, I'll ask a few follow-up questions and moderate a brief discussion. We'll talk a little bit more about their specific projects, but I really kind of want to get into some bigger picture questions, the actual process of development, and get their feedback based on their experiences, both past and present. These guys have been doing this a long time, so what better focus group, if you will, to ask these types of questions than these gentlemen. And at the end, I'll absolutely try to leave some time for question and answers from you folks. So as we're going through this, feel free to jot down thoughts, ideas, questions. We'll have 3 open mics, and I'm going to try to leave 10 or 15 minutes towards the end so you can ask those questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, who in this room probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Vin Veroneau is the president of J.B. Brown & Sons. He joined them in 2005. He's been involved in commercial real estate development, asset management, and marketing since 1987. Prior to his association with J.B. Brown, he was a partner at North Atlantic Commercial Brokers here in Portland and a commercial leasing manager with Northland Development Corporation. He holds a B.S. in finance from the University of San Francisco, an MBA from the University of Southern Maine, and a law degree from the University of Maine. He currently serves as a trustee of Waynfleet and a director of Bangor Savings Bank. The project he's going to highlight for us today is the new 131-room Courtyard by Marriott right down on Commercial Street. It's broken ground. I'm sure you've seen the cranes in the air. It's very exciting, and it is scheduled to open in June of 2014. Vin Veroneau.
Good morning, and thanks for having us, Justin. Thank you. When Justin mentioned that he wanted to do this panel with the 3 of us, I was like, are you sure? I don't know how many people would be here, but I see that Jim and Tim have a lot of friends, so thank you. As he said, I run J.B. Brown & Sons, and the first question I get, because we're known to own office buildings and industrial buildings, is, has J.B. Brown ever done a hotel? And I said, matter of fact, we have. We built the hotel that you see in front of you, the Falmouth Hotel, in 1968. So it's taken us 145 years, but we decided to step back into the hospitality industry. And there's always the concern, and I think Jim will talk about it, are there too many rooms? Well, not since 1968, which was 2 years after the Great Fire of 1866, has the economic conditions been such that we're willing to put our toe back into that market. So we have pretty good faith that things will be positive for J.B. Brown and for the Portland community. One final note on this slide is I should point out that this hotel is on the site where Tim Soley is building his new Hyatt Place. So we were there first, Tim. We've moved on. I thought I'd just give a little overview of an aerial. Just many of you are from Portland, but some may not be. Just to give you an idea of where these projects are happening. This is the site where we'll be building the Courtyard by Marriott, which is on Commercial Street. There's been some fairly good development in this area over the past 5 or 6 years. Gulf of Maine has built across the street. The Pierce Atwood building has been renovated. And so we're excited about extending the Old Port west. Tim's project is right here, and Jim's project is up here. So all in good proximity to the Old Port and visible projects, and I think positive for Portland and the tourist industry and for the tax base. This gives just a more close-up of our site and sort of the area going west. We own a fair amount of land in this area, additional development properties here, so we're hopeful over the next decade that there'll be continued development heading west. I thought, and rather than, I'm really not going to talk about the hotel marketing industry. Jim is much more versed than us in that. I thought I'd just talk about the development process a little bit and how we got to where we're at. When I first started in 2005, I looked at this piece of dirt as a gravel parking lot and knew it had a higher potential. We used PDT, Brian Curley, and developed a 145,000 square foot office building, which is what we thought we would build, which is this is a rendering of, which we talked to a bunch of people. One of the problems with office development is that you need a fair amount of parking, 500 or 600 spaces for a building this size, and it's really not economical to build parking without some sort of TIF subsidy. And so we looked, and so this showed the master development that we were thinking about, a large office building, a parking garage sandwiched between another building up on York Street of 40,000 square feet. And we pitched it to a bunch of people. We also looked at splitting the building in half and doing it in pods where we could do some less costly parking. It didn't really work. And over those years, we were approached by various hospitality groups, which we really didn't want. We didn't know that market. We didn't really want to go in that direction. But as discussions went further, we were approached and had discussions with Maine Course Hospitality, who has a great reputation. They've been 25 years in the business and located in Freeport. And we teamed up with them and with Opeachy Construction, who has a fair amount of expertise in constructing hotels. In fact, did the Hampton Inn over at the Jordan's Meat site. And so we started this initial design. This was in June of 2012. We were going to do a 118-room hotel on the site, leaving developable land, again, to the west, so we could attach to with another use down the line. It just didn't seem to fit the site well, and so we further defined that, had discussions with Portland Planning, and looked at maybe adding some additional uses to the property, which we came up with. This is sort of our final site plan, in which we increased or improved Foundry Lane with a pedestrian easement that has been upgraded on the upper end when we developed the cannery building. So we have a nice pedestrian walkway between the Baxter building and our building. And we added a 6th floor. We'll have 14 apartments, which we've had very good activity on already. We're going to do as rental units. We've had a lot of interest if we wanted to sell the units, but that's not really where we want to go at this point. And then we have a ground floor space of 7,100 feet for either a restaurant or retail. And through discussions with historic preservation and the planning board, this is what we ended up with a final design, which is under construction. Our footings are in. We should be erecting steel here within the next 45 days, and we expect to open in June of 2014. We're very excited about the prospects for this project. And I could only think when Justin again mentioned this thing, I said, geez, no one's going to show up. And it's sort of like the naysayers on the hotel industry. No one's going to show up, but I think they will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vin. Great stuff. Our next panelist is Mr. Tim Soley. Tim is a 1984 graduate of Wesleyan University. Tim established East Brown Cow Management in 1989 with his brothers David and Jack. Since then, East Brown Cow has grown significantly. They and their affiliate companies focus on commercial real estate management, investment, and certainly development. The company's portfolio now includes over 1 million square feet of office, retail, flex space, structured parking downtown, as well as some land in Greater Portland. East Brown Cow, they really pride themselves on modernizing and upgrading the infrastructure of older buildings and historic buildings. And with a focus on energy-efficient solutions and alternatives. So it's a pretty progressive company in that sense. Tim's newest development project that we're going to talk about today is Hyatt Place Hotel. When completed, the hotel will stand at 7 stories, 80,000 square feet, and it is right in the heart of our old port. If you've been down 4th Street, you've seen the cranes are in the air. Hyatt Place is due to open in May of 2014. Tim Soley.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin, and Vin, my friends are your friends. Right, Jim? So here I am, luckily sandwiched between 2 competent, experienced developers. Vin leading a renewed charge at Portland's oldest and most storied real estate developer, and Jim having a lot of specific experience in the new hotels. Well, as I recall from my freshman intro to psychology class, people recall the first and last in the series. So for those of us in the middle, the cloak shall enable me to make outrageous, unsupportable claims with impunity, I expect. So, why is it still on this final design for the Marriott? Okay, so Hyatt Place. I'm going to speak about what it is I'm doing. I think we're all touching on different aspects that people here want to hear about, but I'm going to explain what it is that I'm building. So Hyatt Place is a Hyatt Select Service brand, and that means upscale, limited service. And I chose Hyatt because they're currently unrepresented in Maine. That was important to me because there are a lot of hotels now all over Maine that split reservation systems and have a lot of presence in the marketplace, but Hyatt had none. And they're building a company which they intend to make a brand of preference in the industry, and that's something that's important to me as well. So my property will have 130 rooms, a restaurant, 1,000 square feet of meeting space, 1,100 square feet of separately rented retail space in the corner of Union and 4th Street, all housed in a 7-story building with a top floor with open-air decks yielding views of Casco Bay. Sorry. So I love this area of downtown Portland because it shows to those of us who've been active here in the last 25 years how much has happened in our community. And yes, I'm only 145 years younger than J.B. Brown, my company East Brown Cow, but it has been about a quarter of a century. And for some reason, Vin, your site here is just off the edge over here, I think. and this site here, which was seen fit to be a hotel for J.B. Brown in the 1860s, is where I'm building. So here is the immediate urban context of our site and the genesis of my inspiration to develop a hotel. This quarter century of walking these downtown streets have informed me that this block here, which is bounded by Middle, Union, 4, and Exchange Streets, is really ground zero for Portland's rebirth, and that was important to me. I spend a lot of time. Half my properties are downtown, and in my daily routine, I walk from property to property and have done so for this last quarter century. Portland's motto, Resurgam, and the Phoenix icon both represent this rebirth in my mind. And when I bought these assets 3 years, 3 months, and 12 days ago, approximately, they felt to me like a failed urban planning vision of the 1960s, complete with the suburban setbacks. You see these properties, we all like trees, but these properties were built with suburban setbacks, fences, and first floors that do not invite pedestrian activity, nor the visual engagement of passersby. And that is very important to me when looking at what is good for downtown development, what is good for the urban density, and for this rebirth. So my goal was to bring energy to this urban fabric. This means opening first floors. So as I did at 2 Canal here, we have the Bank of Maine's headquarters has moved here. Large sign here, visible from TD over here and Key Bank over here. And that first floor opening, it makes those buildings more pedestrian friendly, and as I said, engaging to those who pass by. We've also down here on the 4th Street garage opened Five Guys Burgers and Gelato Fiasco. and created better lighting throughout, which is still in process, and removed many of the pedestrian barriers, which were these fences that have been erected over the last 20, 30 years that were meant to inhibit people. In fact, I noticed that as I came down Exchange Street, even though there's penetrations that enter from Exchange Street into the Canal Plaza block, that people would circumnavigate the entire block to go from this area in the core of the pedestrian center to get to the Portland Square block. So I thought, what better than a 24-hour business like a hotel? It never goes dark while exuding life and activity. As a bonus, it complements the infrastructural needs of the office buildings, such as parking. So by that I mean, as Vin pointed out, these office buildings need a lot of parking. So this parking garage is 430 spaces plus the surface parking here. But that parking, generally speaking, is empty most of the time, nights and a lot on weekends. So the parking that this new development represents is complementary in terms of time of day, time of year, time of use, time of the week. It's an incredibly densifying piece of this fabric that makes the same infrastructure reused. So this picture is gratuitous self-promotion. It was my first event. I got the shiny shovel there with East Broncal emblazoned on it. It's still in my office, prepared for the next time it goes out. So our own Michael Brennan, Mayor Michael Brennan, and representatives from Canal 5 Studio, my architecture group, Consigli, the contractor, Schindberg Consulting, the owner's rep, Commonwealth Hotels, who will manage the hotel for me, and Hyatt, as well as the lender, lead lender, Androscoggin Bank. I get dizzy when that goes up. Thank you, Trish. So, passion. My instructions to Patrick Costin of Canal 5 Studio, the architect, were that my wish was to build a legacy asset for our community, the time and place of which represents Portland in the 21st century. My biggest fear, I told him, was that in attempting to set a high standard for design, despite additional time, energy, money, and inspiration, that we might fail. But I think it's worth the risk. This building is a modern structure with a soaring 65-foot sculptural corner window here, reflecting light and energy from its diamond-like facets while engaging in a contrapuntal dialogue with its historic neighbors across the street. The syncopated fenestration against the soldier-like rhythm in the historic structures, the playful first-floor curtain wall dancing in and out around the columns supporting the 6 stories above, is hopefully, in my mind, and it could fail, an excellent representation of where we're going to, of Portland in its new rebirth, building buildings of high quality, construction of high quality design, and integrating the energy that brings to a city. So to step back, that was very serious in the last slide. This is humor. Don't take myself too seriously. I'm not sure if everyone can read what it says on the screen, but it says, "We charge more on sunny days." So in the garage, I spent, there are a number of things that are passions of mine. Energy efficiency being one of them. Design, as I spoke, another. On the garage, on the top of what was a corrugated metal roof, I introduced a couple years ago 23,000 watts, 23 kilowatts of photovoltaics. And that, in addition to the fact that I converted all the lights in the building to LEDs a few years ago, the first structured parking lot in the state that did so, I've reduced about 85% of the energy this garage consumes off the grid, which the irony, quite fitting and fitting in my humor, is that a building filled with carbon dioxide belching internal combustion engines is nearly off the grid. So carrying that forward, we charge more on sunny days. No one's actually offered to pay us more on sunny days. Some people complain that the rates have gone up too much as it is. But at this point, we are producing 50% of the energy in that garage by virtue of those photovoltaics on the roof. And that is very cool. In addition to that, Efficiency Maine and I are partnering in a project to install a combined heat and power plant in the hotel. This is an instrument, a mechanical device that would produce 10,000 watts of power continuously at the same time that the waste energy from it, thermal waste energy, is used to heat the domestic hot water, which in a building with 130 plus bathrooms, there is quite a demand for. And through that work with Efficiency Maine, it'll be a demonstration project, and we'll learn of the effectiveness and the viability of that. This, I should point out, also produces, if I don't use the power in the garage, is enough to drive my Chevy Volt about 100,000 miles a year. So, although the urban density requires garages, and this is the 4th Street garage on the 4th Street elevation, we've attempted to create a retail building which happens to provide structured parking versus a parking garage with a few storefronts. And that's important as we change. This is a building that was a structure that was built by the city in 1981. Not a beautiful structure, but it has had a different place in its history over the last 32 years. Originally, there was a movie theater, cinema on the west end, and it was surrounded with wire fencing and so forth, which we're trying to eradicate to create a building which, from the passerby, has the effect of connecting to the pedestrian activity in the street and being inviting. If you haven't been to Five Guys or Gelato Fiasco or the existing L&M and other retailers along through here, in fact, Bangor Savings built their own little ATM machine here, room a few years ago. It changes this presence of this building on the street, along with the photovoltaics, which is now on the top, on the roof of the side, the south-facing side. Okay, the last couple of slides I'll go through quickly are simply to demonstrate our vision of a building which connects to its urban place and the life of the street, which will make it come alive. These hotels will provide Portland with hundreds of new jobs, cumulatively, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of new financial support in the form of real estate taxes. And I think that what's so important about this, for me, is that we're all local developers. We all care about the community. We're a part of it. It's an intense part of who we are and what we're doing here. And I think that's what's so exciting for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Our final presenter today is Jim Brady. Jim is an experienced real estate developer, having co-founded Olympia Development. He served as Olympia's president for 10 years, and during that time they completed over $200 million in real estate projects, including 5 ground-up hotels, one of which you're all familiar with, the Hilton Garden Inn here in Portland. After leaving Olympia, he moved to Italy to work on a number of other redevelopment projects totaling roughly 400 million euro. Jim is the past president of the Children's Museum of Maine, and prior to his entry into the real estate world, he was an Olympic medalist sailor. Sailed at the America's Cup as well as some other internationally renowned races. Jim is proposing, and I'll let him get into the details, to redevelop the Portland Press Herald building. And this project, it's still in its planning stages, which I think will give us an interesting and different perspective from what Vin and Tim have shared with us, in that it's still ongoing. And just as a quick aside, I really appreciate and respect this type of project. It's a true redevelopment if you think about it. He's turning a empty office building that is somewhat challenging, functionally difficult, into something truly useful and potentially beautiful. That area, Congress Street, Upper Exchange Street, it needs some life, it needs some love, and this is the kind of project that could really bring some positive change and serve as a ripple effect, in my opinion, for that whole area and right into Monument Square. So I appreciate it. Soapbox rant over. Jim Brady.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you all for having me here today. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. As Justin said, we're working on a historic rehabilitation, is the right word they like to use in the industry. It's basically a major gut renovation of the Portland Press Herald former headquarters there. So the building was originally built in 1923 and was subsequently added on to in 1947 as a single use for the newspaper. Interestingly enough, The basement in this building is about 14 feet tall, and there's a second basement underneath that. So if you go down to the lowest basement, you're about 23 feet below the Congress sidewalk. Seems like a pretty good place for a wine cellar to me. But just to put it in context, we're on Upper Exchange Street, right across from City Hall. So really, if you will, in my mind, the center of Portland. The fact that the corner room, just catty corner adjacent to this, has done so well and has such great pedestrian activity to it, it led me to believe that this particular site would work well for a hotel, being tied to the Old Port very effectively in a pedestrian way down Exchange Street, which I think we all know is a wonderful part of the Old Port. So I didn't have to go through the same process that the other two gentlemen here did with a ground-up development. So we're dealing with a base building that already exists. We have a lot of design work to do in that building, but most of it is on the interior rather than on the exterior. Some of the design team here, I'm using Archetype. David Lloyd, who many of you know, has done a number of successful buildings here in Portland. On the right there, you'll see CEI, which is one of the last developments that I did here in Portland before I left to move to Italy. They were also involved in a historic rehabilitation of the old Baxter Library building, which VIA, where my wife works, happens to occupy one of those offices. So a lot of work in historic preservation, and we are planning to use, and we'll maybe talk a bit further about it, historic tax credits on this project. So we have filed for Part 1 with the National Park Service, the Department of the Interior, who administers those programs. And there's a federal tax credit as well as a state of Maine tax credit, which has actually been very successful in getting a lot of adaptive reuse projects done here in the state of Maine and revitalizing a lot of these urban areas. We're looking to do a boutique hotel. And one of the key aspects of the boutique hotel is having really unique and high level of design features in the hotel. So I've reached out and contracted with a group called Stonehill & Taylor, based in New York, who is today considered the top boutique hotel designer in the world. They're on the cover of all the magazines. Some of you maybe have heard of the Ace Hotel in New York and its success, or the Refinery, or the Crosby Street, which is in the lower photos there. Very successful boutique hotels in New York City. So we're delighted to have the talent of somebody like Stonehill & Taylor involved. And this is a question that I get a lot, particularly from the lenders in the audience. Who are you going to be associated with? The hotel industry is a fairly unique animal, if you will. Hotel reservations are generated hundreds and hundreds of different ways through different distribution channels. And because I really wanted to be a boutique hotel here, rather than a cookie cutter, if you will, branded hotel, I've actually found a nice blend, and I'm in discussions with Autograph Collection, which is an independent hotel chain, but it's still tied and associated with one of the most powerful reservation systems in the world, which is Marriott International. So I thought, because I'm more of the hotelier of this group, I would give you a little bit more background on some of the hotels. Everybody says, geez, can Portland really absorb all these hotels? I wanted to give you a couple of little data points. You know, in the last few years, we've had the opening of 300 new rooms in downtown Portland, with the Residence Inn and the Hampton Inn. The market RevPAR, and RevPAR, for those of you who aren't in the hotel industry, is really as a combination of the average daily rate and the occupancy that the hotel is running. So the RevPAR is really the true economic value that's being created in those rooms. And the RevPAR in this market over the last 10 and 5 years has continually been growing. The RevPAR in 2012 set an all-time record, topping its 2007 number. So it's doing particularly well. And many of you know, even though it was very quiet, the Hampton Inn, which is the newest addition to downtown, recently transacted and was sold to a REIT in Palm Beach, Florida, Chatham Lodging Trust, for over $200,000 a key. And if you're not in the business, maybe that benchmark doesn't mean much. But that set an all-time record for any type of transaction like that in the state of Maine, not alone anywhere else. So to give you a little sense of the hotel supply in the marketplace, the Portland market is made up generally of about 4,000 rooms within 10-mile radius of downtown Portland. And of that 4,000 rooms, about 25% of them are located down here on the peninsula. And it's my belief that if you're coming to Portland, Maine to experience what we have to offer in the Old Port, from retailers to the foodie destinations that we have, and to the arts community, You want to be in the Old Port. You want to be downtown. And there has not been many options for the guests to be able to do that. We all know most of these hotels run at high 90% occupancies all summer long, and particularly in downtown. So the existing supply is made up of, as I said, of just over 1,000 rooms and about 7 hotels, the largest which is right here, where it's standing in today, the Holiday Inn by the Bay, at 239 keys. And this is just a little slide to show how the supply has grown in the downtown area in the last 10 years. And if you look at it, it's really virtually doubled from just over 500 rooms to now over 1,000 rooms in the last 10-year period. This data is brought to us by Smith Travel Research, and it just goes to show the strength of this marketplace, which has a very strong average daily rate, an annualized occupancy of almost 77%, and a very strong RevPAR. So even when the Hampton Inn opened and the new supply came into this market, we saw the RevPAR go up. You would think that it would go down because that same revenue is being spread across more rooms now. And what that's a sign of for people in industry is that there's actually pent-up demand that's not being met in the marketplace. And I already mentioned that the Portland supply has nearly doubled in the last 10 years, while the RevPAR has increased over 50% in that same period. And while we saw that Hampton open downtown, you might expect that it maybe drew from some of the Portland, the Maine Mall or the airport type properties. Those properties stayed the same. They didn't go down when the Hampton came online and the RevPAR in the downtown market increased. So again, a sign of pent-up demand in the market. And this is my last stat before I get into some more fun stuff. But Moody's came out and said that Maine's hotel revenue hit an all-time record for 2012. And I just think that as we think as business leaders and community citizens, that the state of Maine is and will continue to be a tourism destination. And I think that tourism is going to continue to grow. We all live here because we love this place. And the great news is that a lot of other people want to come and visit here too. So I think generally speaking, tourism is one of those industries that we can continue to focus on and can continue to be a bright spot for us from an economic standpoint looking forward. We've talked a little bit about, Vin was nice enough to share some of the project specifics on his Courtyard, which I have the wrong key count there, sorry, and also Tim Soley's Hyatt Place. And many of you know that the former Eastland is currently in the process of being converted into a Westin branded hotel, which is a strong brand as well. I think it'll be fantastic that we've got another Starwood. Westin is owned by Starwood, one of the largest, if you will, franchisees in the world. So I think that's going to be great for Portland to have another strong brand like that downtown. The Westin, I understand, is adding about 88 rooms to the supply. I think we all know now where these projects are located. Ours is at the top of Exchange Street. The Hyatt Place and the Courtyard, of course, really more centered on the Old Port. And the Westin really, I think of as being centered in the Arts District across from the Portland Museum of Art. So what is a boutique hotel? A boutique hotel is something that caters to individual travelers and business travelers who are looking for a unique experience that really touches on the local culture of that market, rather than some cookie-cutter design that you could wake up in the morning and you could be in San Francisco as easily as you can be in Atlanta, Georgia. So one of the things that's unique is we don't have these really tight brand standards. It's a little more loose and a little more flexible, which allows you to be a lot more creative. We're planning to call the hotel the Press Hotel. And to give you a sense of the positioning of this, hotels are often broken up into their levels of service, if you will. So there's boutique full-service hotels. We have 2 of those currently in the marketplace, the Portland Harbor Hotel and the Regency that have been here for a while. Both of those hotels are some of the rate leaders in the marketplace today. We've got the Holiday Inn by the Bay here we're in, and the Westin we talked about coming, which is also a full-service upscale hotel. And there's a cluster, if you will, in this select service or limited service sector where the success of the Hilton Garden Inn and the Hampton Inn and the Residence Inn are all really being kind of targeted now by the new supply that's coming on between the Courtyard and the new Hyatt Place. And we really see ourselves pushing the envelope, if you will, on high level of service, high level of design, and creating more of a lifestyle or experiential hotel. We think of the brand attributes for this hotel as being authentic, because we all know you can't fool anybody in Portland. There's nothing worse than having something that's fake here. We want to be inviting, creative, contemporary, and create an unexpected feeling for our guest. We're steps away and miles apart, and I love this tagline. I can't take credit for it. Via has done the branding work on this project, but in many ways it really resonates with me. We are steps away from everything you would want on the Old Port, with retail, restaurants, shopping, arts, and everything else, and yet we're miles apart from everything that exists in the marketplace today. But I think as Mainers, we're miles apart from what this market has to offer. There's nothing else like Portland, Maine and the rest of the country, and we need to celebrate that. So there we are. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. We're running a little behind, and I do want to leave some time for question and answer, so I'm going to trim up my my moderated discussion. I still want to ask you guys a couple specific questions. Jim, I'm glad you shared some of the statistical stuff. That's great information in the data sets that you've researched. I want to give Vin and Tim a chance to elaborate a little bit on what their thoughts were when they started planning a hotel. The biggest question, as you alluded to, is can our city support this many rooms? Vin, do you want to lead this one off and give us a little insight as to what your thoughts were when you were broaching the idea?
Yeah, I mean, we hired professionals to do our market study to demonstrate to us that the market could support both the rate and occupancy levels that we needed to make this economically feasible. Those were confirmed by Jim Brady of Cushman Wakefield when they did the appraisal on the property, and so we feel really comfortable about where things sit in this marketplace.
Great. Tim?
So I guess, flanked by two guys who know much more about development and the hospitality industry, I felt I was in good company. Flanked by my two gentlemen here, and I think that it's, as Vin pointed out, a part of the process to get financing for anyone looking at the hospitality industry to get demand studies. So we used Pinnacle out of Boston, and they gave us numbers that were pretty much unbelievable to me, given how tough it's been in the commercial real estate business for the last 5 years. It's been a brutal business, and I think there was an aha moment, what's happening and what really is happening to Portland. It's funny because over the last couple of decades, I look back and I see Portland having made quantum changes, and during those years that I was in the trenches, I felt only incremental changes, but looking back, it's quite different. And I think that demand that was there, and the rigor that one goes through to get financing and learn about the market indicated how much capacity there was for new rooms.
Yeah. Any further thoughts, Jim? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about, this will probably be my last question, the actual development process, and this is sort of a juicy one. This is a great panel to have this question about because you guys have done this in the past and you're doing it now. The knock on Portland, fair or unfair? I know there's some city officials here. We're not here to beat anybody up, but the regulatory process, City Hall, can be, I guess, challenging to navigate. To the extent that you are comfortable, can you share with us your impression of the process as a whole? And maybe if you had a magic wand, what would be one thing that you would perhaps change? And I want Tim to go first because I know you've got some.
Magic wand? To be kind, a magic wand would be one simple thing. Permit process faster. Thank you, Greg.
Simple.
So I must say, and people have heard me say this before, the trajectory in City Hall is great. There's been a wholesale change in the energy and in the intent, and that is really wonderful. Has it achieved where it needs to get to? No. And I think everybody in City Hall knows that as well, but it has been a very productive change in the 20-something years I've been doing this. I didn't think that this would happen this quickly, and it is starting to happen.
Great. Vin?
Yeah, we found that both the planning staff and the planning board were great to deal with. We had the added layer of having to incorporate historic preservation review into this project. And again, they were very accommodating with respect to the speed in which they rescheduled meetings. And if I had anything to do, I might combine those two processes to make it a little bit more efficient, because one has jurisdiction over the other, and so you talk to one and there's slight change, you've got to go back to the other body. And so if they were combined, I think it might make it a little bit more easier to deal with.
Jim?
Well, I think our project was a little bit easier, if you will, in the sense that it's not a ground-up project. So that really made the permitting process really expedited, if you will. So we had a great experience working together, both with the planning board as well as historic preservation. I will comment, though, that the point that Vin made, where the two different boards can have opposing views, I'll give you one example. We really wanted to install street trees on Federal Street. But to allow us to do that, we had to move the sidewalk. And so no requirement from the planning board to do anything. We could have left it just the way it was, but we as the developer wanted to improve the streetscape. And there was a feeling within the Historic Preservation Board that they didn't want to block the facade of this beautiful building with street trees. So I had the planning board wanting something that the developer wanted, and Historic Preservation maybe saying maybe that's not appropriate. We ultimately came to a solution, but that, I think, is just one example of how maybe a more coordinated effort between the two groups could yield a better result that is a little bit quicker. But overall, we had a very positive experience.
Great, thank you for that. At this point, I would like to open it up to you folks. We have 3 open mics. If anybody has questions, feel free to run up there. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sally Oldham, and I serve on the board of Greater Portland Landmarks and chair the Public Issues Committee of our organization. Have had the opportunity for all 3 of these gentlemen to come and talk with us about their projects. And we're very excited that this sort of development is happening right downtown in the midst of all of our historic area. One thing I'm interested to hear your comments about, perhaps, though, is we have some fabulous buildings that are really underutilized in the downtown area. The Portland Company and the Masonic Temple come to mind. And I know each of these hotels, because you're working in a limited urban space, has a limited function space in it. And you have different market targets for your different hotels. But nevertheless, I wondered if you might think about working together in terms of looking at the needs for function space for conference attendees, whatever, that might take advantage of some of these historic buildings that are underutilized, that might somehow have, say, a jitney service that could go around downtown to different historic spaces that could be used for folks that would patronize your hotels, and might be a selling point, in fact, in terms of bringing business, because you would really take advantage of the unique features of downtown Portland.
It's a fine idea.
I would say that the best opportunity for some good function space in Portland is with the Westin Hotel and in the Congress Square. I know there's discussions with the city on repurposing that park or a portion of that park, and I think that it would be in the city's best interest and the community's best interest to try to work with the Westin on getting that pushed through.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, and it seemed like all of you were sort of in support of that. That was one of my questions, but we kind of ran out of time. I want to keep it going. Yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Peter Daigle. I work with Lafayette Hotels, and we have the good fortune of owning this hotel right here. Currently, at least, the largest hotel in Portland. Smaller, by the way, than the Falmouth Hotel. Falmouth had 240 rooms, and we have 239. My question is, and I was glad to see that a couple of you were able to stand on our roof to take the aerial photos of your site. My question is, how much did your feasibility studies interact, and how much did you consider the redevelopment of the Eastland? Because if there was one feasibility study that says we need 120 new rooms in Portland, and all 3 of you are building those 120 rooms, we're up to 400 rooms or whatever the number is. So how much did you consider each other's projects and the redevelopment of the Eastland?
I think we can probably all address that, but just try to quickly. When I hired Cushman Wakefield to do a feasibility study, and I told them that as far as I was concerned, Tim Soley was going to move forward with a select service hotel. I didn't actually know what it was at the time, and I believed that Vin Veroneau at J.B. Brown was going to move forward with the Courtyard. So and we already knew that the Eastland conversion was going on, so I made it very clear to them what those other projects were and to calculate that into the supply as they looked at it. Obviously, you bring up a good point that if everybody's report didn't include that, then we might be overbuilding. But I think it's fair to say that the others did a similar.
I would add to that, Jim, that, I mean, it's a collegial atmosphere. We've all known each other for years. And I think that in that conversation and dialogue that we had, we understood not only who was going to build, but what else out there could possibly be built over the next few years. And I think so what we did, converse, Peter, of what you suggested, which is basically I used Pinnacle, Cushman Wakefield. We said, look, assume there are going to be 3 hotels opening in the 2014 timeframe. And now tell us, is there sufficient demand to meet the supply? And that's a very converse process than one might have typically gone to and said, tell us how many rooms this market could support. And I think that, again, I like to focus that, given that we are all, 3 local developers, it is in all of our best interest that these hotels and the whole community, including, this hotel here, does well, and it all grows and feeds each other.
We have time for one more question.
Evan.
Thank you. Evan Carroll with Build Architecture. Tim, I, as an architect, enjoyed how you talked a bit about sort of your passion for design and the statement you wanted to make. And Vin, I heard you allude just a little bit to feeling a little bit battered down by the historic and planning board. I was wondering if, Tim, you could sort of talk to whether you thought, first of all, I don't remember if you're in historic or not, so maybe mention that. And then just sort of what the process was like, sort of trying to push something that was a little bit different from what Portland's used to.
So, Evan, thank you. I mean, it is a passion of mine, and being a little obsessive compulsive, perhaps sometimes I take it a little far. I can see Patrick back there in the corner, grunting yes, of course, right? So I think that in my property, though it's not in the historic district, it borders the historic district, so it's within 100 feet, which gives the Historic Preservation Committee oversight, and they use that oversight liberally, let's say. I think, and I've done a lot of historic preservation, Sally was talking about historic rehabs, all of my early years were spent, taking buildings that were built in the era of J.B. Brown and rehabbing them, and it's great fun, and I really enjoyed that adaptive reuse and bringing those structures into the 21st century. But I can tell you that there's fear. I have anxiety that this property, this building becomes something that's significant, that, as I termed it, a legacy asset. But there's fear in those in the community who think of historic preservation as something that's locked in time. And we're a vibrant, dynamic city. We're growing. There's activity here, and I think that it's important to respect what historic buildings represent, but also bring to them the modern idea of time and place when building new. In fact, the National Park Service, is quite explicit in determining that buildings built in historic districts should not copy in terms of material and vocabulary, but that they should be clearly represented so you know which buildings are new and which buildings are old.
A little more specifically, I mean, you got it through, so do you credit Patrick with that? Or, I mean, what was the process?
It was a productive but painful process.
That's a good line to wrap up on. We're out of time. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for the... Thank you all, and thank you for your candor this morning. Thank you for your accessibility, and keep up what you're doing. It's great for the city of Portland. I appreciate it.